order to talk about the Lapham Patterson house, you have to look at the history of Thomasville because the two are so closely connected. And you know the story already, how in the late 1800s Thomasville was enjoying a lot of popularity as a wonderful winter resort. I mean, it was ranked right up there with Paris and Rome and other exotic places as the place to go to spend the winters. At that point in time, doctors thought that our pine-scented air was helpful, and they sent patients, particularly patients with pulmonary problems, to this area to recuperate. Now we know that that same air breeds allergies, but back then they thought that it was a good thing. But a lot of communities in the few short years following the war between the states had very bitter feelings about the Northerners, and they were not very welcoming to them. Thomasville, though, was very progressive in its thinking and welcomed them here in a big way. In fact, more than welcomed them, they rolled out the red carpet. They built big hotels in downtown Thomasville. This is a story that I love to tell and love to hear about. I never get tired of it because I keep being amazed that this happened right here in Little Thomasville, Georgia. Big hotels in town, a lot of boarding houses, all to accommodate the northern visitors because they changed the population when they came every year by some 10 to 15,000 people. Of course, the railroad line ended here in those days, and that helped the situation. They had not yet discovered what caused yellow fever, and so people were a little afraid to venture into Florida. So they came this far south from northern cities like Cleveland and Chicago. They found the mild climate, they found the good hunting that was here, and a whirlwind of social activities, and so they came in large numbers. And many of them stayed in the hotels that were built. Some bought plantation property on the outskirts of town, and others bought lots in town and built winter cottages for themselves. And that's what Charles Lapham did. He built the Lapham Patterson house on North Dawson Street. At the time that the house was constructed, it was recognized as a very unique and a very modern house for its time. And Mr. Lapham allowed it to be used in promotions to encourage Northerners to come to Thomasville. It was one of the first houses in the city to have indoor bathrooms, gas lighting, and hot and cold running water. Charles Lapham, again the original owner of the house, the man who had it built, was from Chicago, and he was a very wealthy shoe merchant there. Had experienced lung damage from being in the Great Chicago Fire. So his doctors encouraged him to come to Thomasville, and he loved this community, and he was very involved in it for several years. Mr. Lapham had one of his shoe stores was in the prestigious Palmer House Hotel, so he was a very wealthy shoe merchant. He and his family enjoyed the Lapham Patterson house as a winter home for several years. Here you see his wife with their son Charles Jr., and the other photograph is also of Mrs. Lapham with three of their five children. Today the house looks like this on North Dawson Street, and you know, you talk to people in town, and Gary made some comments to me before the meeting started kind of like this. You mentioned the Lapham Patterson house and people say, oh, that's the big yellow house down on Dawson Street, or I toured that place years ago. I thought it was closed. That's right. I hear it's haunted, you know. So the information that I want to, and I think Gary said I thought it was closed. The information I want to share with you today is that it is not closed anymore, and maybe I can tell you a few other things about the house that you don't already know. So this is the front view if you drive down Dawson Street. Here now is the back of the house. Very strange looking house, I will admit. And it looks as though it was added on to, but in fact this is the way it was built back in 1885. Here's the floor plan of the first floor of the house. Notice that there are three rooms basically across the front, two parlors, and a dining room. It's built kind of like a U. On the one wing is the family quarters, and the other, the service areas of the house. Then we have the second floor, which has 2 bedrooms, 2 sitting areas, and a bath, and a third floor with just 1 room, which was the game room. Here are a few basics about the house. It's an asymmetrical plan. Mr. Lapham, because of his health concerns, wanted to build a house as safe as it could be and as healthy a house as it could be. So he worked with his architect, who was Tudor Romadal, also of Chicago, to design and build this house. And no angles are quite even, no windows quite square, no rooms quite the same. It's very strange, but in that regard. But he did that because it was thought in Victorian times that an asymmetrical house was a healthier house. It sort of mimicked nature, allowed for better airflow, and so that was his reason for building this house in the way that he did. It's a Queen Anne design, and Queen Anne designs are typified by wood construction, lots of color, different textures, different roof lines, different window shapes and sizes. And I think a bit of this has to do with the same kinds of things that we see in society today. If I build a house with 3 bedrooms, you'll come along and build one with 4. If I put 3 slants to my roof, you'll come along and put 5. You know, how can I outdo my neighbor? So I think a little bit of that entered into the way that Mr. Lapham decided to build his house. It has 6,000 square feet in it, 19 rooms, 45 doors. 45 doors. Are you listening? 24 of those are exterior doors. And me, I think, golly, wouldn't it be awful when you got ready to go to bed at night, you'd think, did I lock door number 18? I can't remember. 53 windows in the house, and the whole house is built of Georgia heart pine, and it has all of its original flooring and woodwork. But again, let's go back to all the doors and windows. The reason for that was Mr. Lapham's fear of fire. He wanted to be sure that his family was safe and that there was a way out if in case of fire. So every room has an exit. It's really neat. Not every room has a door, but the windows are such that you can let them up and step out that way if you need to. At the turn of the century, about the time this house was built, tuberculosis hospitals were being built in the same fashion, and with a lot of side porches and breezeways so that patients with lung problems could get to fresh air. At the Lapham Patterson house, when you go out a door or go out a window, you're not always going to be on the ground floor or have steps to the ground, but you at least can get to a point where you feel or you have fresh air to breathe, and that was his concern. This house cost $4,500 to build and took 11 months in the construction. It's basically had 3 owners. The first 2 used it as a winter home, and the third family as a year-round residence. When the Laphams sold it, they sold it to the Larman family. Sorry, we don't have any pictures of the Larmans, sadly, but we do know that Mr. Larman was in the barbed wire fence company business. In fact, he was the founder and the owner of the Cincinnati barbed wire fence company. And he and his family came and bought this house from the Laphams, and they too, the Larmans, used it as a winter home. Now, another point to be mentioned is that when the house sold each time, it sold fully furnished. Interesting concept there. But after the Larmans left, the Pattersons came to town. Mr. Patterson was in the turpentine business in North Carolina, and he and his family wanted the Lapham Patterson house as a full-time residence. and so it became that for them in 1905. And they raised their family there. And Mr. Patterson had an office in the house that he used for his turpentine business dealings, and he and his workers created a lot of the roads that lead to different, or led, I should say, to different turpentine stills in southern Thomas County and down into Florida. And one of those is the Patterson Still Road that's still in place today. If you didn't know where that name came from, that's it. The last of the family members to own the house was Alice Patterson Stevens. She was the oldest daughter of Mr. Patterson, and she owned the house for many years, long after her parents were gone. And even after she married and moved away, she still held on to it. She did not want to sell it. She was afraid it would be torn down, and she did all kinds of things to keep from having to sell it, including taking in boarders and what have you. But eventually she did have to sell it, and when she sold it, she sold it to the city of Thomasville. The year was 1970. The city held on to it for a while and then deeded it to the state of Georgia. And luckily for all of us, I think, the state of Georgia saw merit in keeping the house going, so they did lots of renovations on it and opened it for tours in the early 70s and operated it full-time as a house museum until 2009. And at that point, I think it was June of 2009, at that point the economy was bad, the attendance was low, and they closed the house. It was a sad day for those of us who recognize the importance of LP House to the community, and they were beginning to board up the windows. That's how serious it got. But luckily, our local Museum of History stepped in and signed an agreement with the state to operate the house. So it is still today owned by the state of Georgia, but opened now because our Museum of History signed that contract. So that's how those of us who are there can be there today, and we're very appreciative of that. These next few pictures will show you some of the interiors of the house. This is the dining room, and although the house does not have a lot of its original furniture any longer, we do have the dining room furniture that belonged to the Lapham family. This dining room, as you saw in that earlier slide, is kind of located in the center of the house, as was typical of a lot of Victorian houses. Placing it in the center of the house gave you the opportunity to use the room other than for just meals. It was used as a kind of social hall. An interesting feature of the dining room is a sink over in the corner of the room, allowing you to wash your hands before you sat down to eat. And another feature that can be seen from the dining room is the chimney, and particularly the double flues of the chimney. Again, Mr. Lapham was concerned about his health and the health of his family and about the danger of fire, and so he had this chimney done with 2 flues above. And the staircase is neat too. You can see a portion of it here in this picture, but it winds around and goes behind the staircase, and one set of stairs, the chimney. One set of stairs takes you to the 2nd floor, and the other set to the 3rd floor. And there you see too the one of the stained glass windows in the house. They're beautiful Queen Anne stained glass windows. This is one of the original fire extinguishers. They did have these in every room of the house. I think we have 2 today that can be seen, but they contained boric acid and baking soda, and you were to pull the fixture off the wall and just fling the powder at the flames and I guess hope for the best. I don't know how effective they were. Here you can see some of the beautiful inlaid work, woodwork of the floor of one of the parlors. It really is extraordinary woodwork in the house. And this spiderweb design, kind of a novelty, is a part of the flooring in the dining room. This is the formal parlor, And that's the largest of the stained glass windows in the house. This light fixture is one of the original gas fixtures that was later electrified. And we mentioned Alice Patterson as the last of the family members to own the house. This piano that you see in this photograph did belong to her. Most of the other furniture has been donated by people in the community to the house over the years. This is the informal parlor or library, and in the Pattersons' time there, when they were there full time, this was enjoyed like we do our dens at home. They relaxed in the evenings there, read books perhaps, or listened to music, or played games. That parlor has a beautiful plaster medallion that has roses on it, or in it, so I think it's very appropriate for Thomasville to have that. This is the kitchen area, and the kitchen has its original water heater and sink, zinc-lined sink. It has an ice box, actually a refrigerator, that held a 50-pound block of ice. And the upstairs area, you can see the sitting areas and 2 bedrooms, as I mentioned before. This bedroom has Lapham furniture in it. And look at the closet. This is another neat thing that this house had that most houses being built at that time did not. Closets. We take them for granted today, but years ago they didn't build houses with closets in them. So that was a real new and innovative thing to have in the home. Also, coat hangers had only recently been invented when this house was built, so they were not so readily available. So you see how people hung their clothes in the closet on hooks. And this is that one room on the 3rd floor, the game room or the gentleman's parlor. It was often used for billiards, and the stairs that you see there create a little gallery space where spectators could watch the game and not be in the way of the players. This next slide shows the same room looking from the other direction, and you see the stained glass window reflection on the stairs there, and at some certain times of the day, that reflection comes on into the room and makes a beautiful pattern on the floor. Now, we've already mentioned the fact that the house is a little quirky. I'm sure you could tell us stories you've heard about the quirkiness of the house. Let me show you a few slides to just kind of verify that it is a quirky house. Look at the fireplaces on the upstairs level. This is an area that's a part of those sitting rooms upstairs. These 2 fireplaces are side by side, separated by a half wall. Look at the difference in the 2, height-wise and width-wise. Would that bother you? Somebody came to tour and said, Mr. Monk would hate this. Do you ever watch Monk on television? Look at the curving wall of the kitchen. And this room, which used to be the master bedroom, is now our docent's lounge. Look at the difference of the heights of the doors and windows in this room alone. It's pretty amazing, it really is, when you stop to look at it. The gingerbread on the house is neat too. You see the beautiful designs there, and the top picture shows you the design, and then at the bottom you see how the design reflects on the balcony when the sun shines through. It's really neat to see that. A cow is a part of that large board design, and some have speculated, we don't know, that it is to remind folks of the Great Chicago Fire and the fact that Ms. O'Leary's cow kicked over the lantern that started the fire. I don't know, but there's a cow in the large board. And then you see the roof lines. I told you they were different. Lots of different roof lines to make up the Lapham Patterson house. So yeah, it's quirky, but it's so interesting. I found this little poem that I think is just perfect for it, so bear with me while I read this to you. Be it ever so humble, Newman Levy. The elephant and the ocelot, the tiger and the rabbit are functional and choosy in the places they inhabit, But noble Homo sapiens defy the wind and rainstorm beneath the shelter that suggests a nightmare or a rainstorm. Scorn not the architectural freak, nor shriek in horror from one, although it may seem mad to you, it's home sweet home to someone. Today, the Lapham Patterson House is taking a bit of a different direction. We are opening the house and the grounds for special events. We had a small wedding there earlier, and we hope to have more. It's a great place for weddings, receptions, rehearsal dinners, all kinds of teas, luncheons, dinners, corporate events. So, you know, we'd love to talk to you about planning your bridge luncheon there or your family get-together. It's just a great resource that we have right here in our community that we need to take advantage of. Our event planned for Christmas is a tablescapes event, and this will occur the weekend of Victorian Christmas. We're going to have a number of tables set up by some of the merchants in town and some individuals who have beautiful china and silver and stemware, and they're going to set tables and give us the opportunity to appreciate seeing that set up. So the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of Victorian Christmas, bring your wives and come see our tablescapes exhibit. I think that's going to be very exciting. The Lapham Patterson House, as I have said, is an important resource right here in our community. It's a big part of Thomasville's history, and we're so glad that it's open again, and we want to see it stay open. So I ask you today to please come, take the tour. If you've had the tour before, the house is going to look different to you today than it did the last time you were there, and maybe you can see some more of the quirkiness, maybe you can learn some more of the history, but please come and support it. Bring your friends when you have company over to see the Lapham Patterson House. We'd just be so happy to see you there. Susan Hapicorn and Billy Taylor and Martha Rachel are all volunteering with us there, and you know, we would just love to have you come and take our tour. I think that concludes this program. I'll allow you to ask questions, as I said, if they're not too hard.
So,
yes.
How does one set up a tour?
We have a group rate if you have 10 or more, but you can come without an appointment on Friday afternoons, 1 to 5, or Saturdays, 10 to 5, or Sunday afternoons, 2 to 5. The other weekdays, your tours have to be by appointment through the museum. But we're there every weekend, and we'd be happy to see you anytime.
And we don't stick to the on the hour.
No, we don't. Thank you, Susan. One of the things that I need to say, when the Lapham Patterson House was open previously, they operated on an hourly schedule, so that you had to show up at the right time to get a tour, or you waited an hour before you could have one. We don't do that. We're lucky enough, I'm lucky enough to have a lot of people helping, and it gives us the flexibility to take people as they come, and that's what we do. We try to see that there's no wait at all, and if there is, that it's a very short wait.
You don't want it to be quirky.
That's right. That's right.
How much of the cost of the tours?
Thank you. The tour is $5 a person, and children under 18 get in for $1. And like I said, if you have a group of 10 or more, it's $4. It's a group rate of $4.
You can get in for $1.
Any other questions? Those weren't too hard. Well, it was a pleasure to be with you.